Musashi, Miyamoto Musashi, who's I don't know if you ever heard.
Book of Five Rings.
Yes. He's the most famous samurai.
Yeah.
And supposedly he had over 100 duels, right? Think about it.
And never lost.
Well, he'd be dead, So over 100 duels. Okay, that means he killed.
Close up.
Right? Over 100 people.
Yeah.
To finally realize they don't got to kill anymore. Right? To finally get it out of system to say, you know what? I'm not going to do it anymore. And retreated as a pretty much a farmer, never raising sword again. And he made little statuettes of all the samurais he dueled.
Wow.
And he put it as a shrine and prayed for them.
Wow.
Right? In one of the Book of Five Rings, the idea, right? What does it say? One of the things in there, right? Treat your opponent, your enemy, like a guest in your home. Because we're fellow warriors.
Wow. Yeah, and you pray for them. You pray for them to show up strong, so they show up at their best to give you.
Yes, and after they're dead, he's praying for them.
Yeah.
But think about, that's to live with that, right? And there is that he's fighting that guilt, that thing of taking life. But the thing is that why he's able to have some redemption and is able to carry on is because these are all warriors who chose to be there, right? It was the way they tested each other to, our sense of manner to see who is truly best, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is the other component of it that really, I think, brings about many of the dissatisfaction and the unhappiness for many of the men. Yeah.
In the samurai way, it's not only the fighting, the swordsmanship, there's also an element of poetry, of writing in script, of being a musician. There's an artistry that goes hand in hand with the warrior path. Is there anything like that in the Hwarang way? Is there an element of the artistry that's also embedded in a culture?
Well, it's there in our name.
Yes.
It's in there in our name. It's the flowering man. It's the Chinese character. These are old. So one thing you have to understand is that most of Asia, China, Japan, Korea, and even some of the other small Southeast Asia, use Chinese characters. Okay, they just pronounce it differently, but they all written form is Chinese character. So mainly China, Japan, and Korea all use Chinese character. So in the Chinese character is an ideogram, right? One word, it's not an alphabet, right? So one word is a symbol, and that symbol means many things. It symbolizes many ideas, concepts, sounds. It is used for just sound now in China, but the character has meaning. So it's the character of a flower, and it's a character of a man, and Do or Tao is where the Taoism comes from, is the road is a symbol of a country road, is Tao. So Hwarang, so many of the Japanese tease the Hwarang, our history, flower men, because their character today, the flower, they use it for prostitute. So they're saying, they're male prostitutes or Hwarang, But actually, no, because the state religion at the time was Buddhism. And it was very heavily influenced by Buddhism. And it was the idea of flowering, the idea of enlightenment, coming into being, right? So it had many of those aspects. And the Hwarang were actually, after they did their military service, they became statesmen, Then after statesmen, they became bodhisattva. They became Buddhist priests who went in search of enlightenment. And actually, there are many stories of the Hwarang who made pilgrimage back to India. And so you'll see, actually, there's like a Byzantine tomb with Hwarang in the procession of the funeral of the king. And how do you know that? Because the Hwarang wore on their headband 2 peacock feathers. And they were painted with these 2 peacock feathers. Yes, so the Hwarang were also the first ones to create the first stylized form of poetry called the hyanga, which is like the haiku later on in Japan. But they wrote poems.
Was it similar in terms of like the 3 stanzas, the syllables, short poems?
Short poems, yeah, short poems. They were, I think, consisted of like 8 lines.
Have you ever written any of these?
Well, you know, I dabble in some poetry. I write monthly now an article on Buddha International. The point is that the idea of beauty, right? The idea of beauty is aesthetics. And aesthetics is understanding form, structure, in some way, the idea of perfection. You know, beauty equates with perfection, aspiration of perfection. So the Hwarang, you see, our quest, even then and still today, it is the constant quest for human perfection. Then that requires you to understand aesthetics of beauty, you know. So I have a saying that I tell to my students, you know, that our goal is to be strong without force and to be beautiful without effort. That's the goal, right? By mere presence, by your mere existence, and that's the whole point. What I also talk about Musashi, right? Or many of the people who fight, many of the fighters who fight or whatever, or the reason why men fight. And this kind of comes around to what I said earlier about competitiveness and why I think, you know, one of the things that drives men, the testosterone, what makes us men is our competitiveness, you know, our fierceness, and what's negative about that is that you can't help but to compare yourself to other people. You know, being competitive means that you're constantly comparing yourself to other people. See, and when you're constantly comparing to other people, you're trying to see who's better, who's the whatever. And when you're not meeting up to those expectations, or you're not, you know, then you collapse. You know, you either are high performing, or if that is the source that defines you as an individual, your identity, and when that no longer exists, then you implode. You then fall, collapse internally, right? In your self-doubt, your depression, your self-loathing, suicidal, all those things, pity, self-pity, all those come, and then that leads to addiction, that leads to, so it's such a, important, balance of how to fuel that competitiveness, the drive, at the same time, how to balance that with some sense of peace and calmness. Yeah. See, this is what I mean by also Musashi is, look, he had to have been really, really, really insecure in tremendous doubt. He had to kill 100 people, win 100 duels to realize, you know what? I don't need to fight anymore. is my point. And you can look at him to say, yeah, he's the greatest samurai and the greatest duelist in history. Yes, but in another way, you got to go, wait a minute.
He's a little bit crazy too.